What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the 8 Count, a series powered by Atlanta Boxing Social Club. I'm your girl, JasmineK, delivering boxing updates and keeping you in the know of what's going on in the boxing scene. This week, we're getting into the late replacement against Tim Tszyu, as well as some matchups that are brewing, and maybe even a teaser of a matchup that we may see in a rematch between Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia. But we all know that Ryan has a tall task ahead of himself. And I'm not talking about Devin Haney, but I'm talking about the mental of Ryan Garcia. Without further ado, let's get into this 8 count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Count number 1. Last week, Top Rank unleashed a slew of new signees, of which I believe the signing of 26-0 Christian MBILLI to a promotional contract in ties with Eye of the Tiger was maybe the biggest deal that Top Rank pulled off just yet in all of the signees that they announced last week. Now, despite the age of Christian MBILLI being 28 and being in what will arguably be the prime of his career, yet there's still being some areas that we see still needs to be developed, specifically on the defensive side. I think that there's a lot of uphill potential to Christian MBILLI and this signee that Top Rank committed to. And when I say that there's uphill potential for Christian MBILLI despite his age, what I mean by that is I think there's a lot of room for MBILLI to be a great matchup challenger in the super middleweight division. You got a lot of guys out there that he could present a great dancing partner if given the opportunity. Top Rank can make a lot of great fights happen within the super middleweight, and even if Christian MBILLI decides to move up to light heavyweight, as we already know, Top Rank has the top guys within that division signed to them. So I see a lot of potential there, but let's just keep it right here in the super middleweight division and not go too far, because as you would have to expect, that Top Rank signed him with the expectation that he's going to become a champion in the super middleweight division. However, one of the things that has me scratching my head is the fact that Top Rank only has one other super middleweight currently signed to them, and that is Javier Martinez, a guy who fights out of Robert Garcia's stable. So there's potential there. Maybe not the biggest matchup, I think, in Christian MBILLI's fight debut under Top Rank. So when we think about the other guys that are in the super middleweight division, we have to turn our attention to PBC, as they have the top contenders, top challengers, and former champions of none other than, and to name just a few, Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, Boo Boo Andre, Charlo, and many more. So where does that leave matchups for Christian MBILLI? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see exactly what Top Rank does with him. One thing's for sure is there's a lot of great potential fights for him out there. I'm interested to see who he's going up against next. Moving on to count number 2, we have Shakur Stevenson spinning the block, if you will, and calling out Devin Haney, requesting to be his replacement fight in the event that Ryan Garcia does not make it to April 20th. As we're getting closer and closer to that date, a lot of us are still on the edge of our seats, wondering if this fight is actually going to happen. We already know Golden Boy has positioned Arnold Barboza to be that replacement fight. So that's neither here or there, with everybody wanting to step in and be that replacement against Devin Haney, as it is clear that they already have a backup. But let's get back into Shakur spinning the block here. My thing is, Shakur had the opportunity to go up against Devin Haney. He had the opportunity to better himself. And for whatever the reason being, mainly what we know is him not being satisfied with the percentage that was offered to him. But I've been on record saying that Shakur should have just bet on himself. I think taking that fight against Devin Haney at that point in time, at any point in time going forward, really positions himself to be in the driver's seat in the division. Right now, we know that he's still in the lightweight division, and Haney has moved up with no sights of coming back down from the super lightweight division to the lightweight division. So again, what are we really talking about here? Shakur had his opportunity. Arguably, he fumbled it. Bill had a lot to say, and none short of the fact that he would never enter into negotiations with Shakur ever again, expressing that he felt like he wasted his time and they're moving on to bigger and better things. As Devin also made it a point to say that Shakur shouldn't be worried about what's going on in the super lightweight division, but should be worried about what's right in his backyard of his division, and that being Tank. Let's go back to why he hasn't called out Tank. I think, and this is strictly speculation, I think that he doesn't call out Tank, which he has called out Tank, but I think he's not as aggressive with it because we all know that that's not the way to get a fight with Tank. Similar to how Canelo moves, Tank moves the same exact way. There's not a whole lot of method to his madness. I will say that, in being the difference between him and Canelo, where we see Tank taking on fights that are arguably just the biggest money-making fights, which he's earned himself in a position to do, but you don't see him going after champions as aggressively as we see Canelo doing. But again, going back to the fact that Tank is just not a guy that if you call him out aggressively that he's going to give you the opportunity. And I think that there's a abundance amount of respect from Shakur to Tank as far as him not calling him out. But we'll see what happens with Shakur. The thing that I want to see with him is for him to just be active. I want to see him back in the ring. I want to see him avenging his performance against De Los Santos. If we're not going to get the rematch, then with somebody else. And right now, it seems as though he may be fighting William Zepeda, a fight that would be really good, would be a good resume of a matchup for him. And I think there's a lot of potential for him to dominate in that fight. A matchup that I think presents a great resume builder for him, as well as a great stylistic fight. You have a guy in Zepeda that is going to press the fight to Shakur Stevenson. He's going to be right there in his face. He's not going to be afraid to close the distance, as what we saw against De Los Santos. And I think we get a similar fight to the Oscar Valdez, and certainly a similar performance from Shakur that we saw against Oscar Valdez. But we'll see what happens next with that. I am high on the idea of having a Top Rank versus Golden Boy card, as there's a lot of potential matchups there that the fans are salivating over. But we'll see what happens with Shakur. Count number 3. This week we had breaking news in the replacement of Tim Tszyu's opponent being Sebastian Fedora, as we know that Keith Thurman sustained a bicep injury during his training camp in a sparring session. So this fight goes from being a non-title fight, of which we know Tim Tszyu was not defending his WBO super welterweight belt, to a title fight and a unification fight for both the WBO and the vacant WBC belt against Sebastian Fedora. One of the things that both of these guys have in common is their last opponent being Brian Mendoza, and arguably, in saying that, we should have got this matchup late last year. As we know, Brian Mendoza upset Sebastian Fedora. So had Sebastian Fedora actually won against Brian Mendoza, we may have been seeing this matchup take place in October of last year instead of what we got in Tim Tszyu versus Brian Mendoza. But here we are now. We're getting the fight between both of these guys, and it's going to be a unification fight for both the WBO and WBC belts, as I've already stated. So what can we expect coming into this fight? One thing that I think is going to be the biggest advantage and play to the strength of Fedora is the height advantage that he has over Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu being 5'8" and Sebastian Fedora being 6'5", 6'6" presents a 9 to 10 inch difference here. But one thing I'll say is what we saw in the last fight of Fedora versus Mendoza is an advantage turned into a disadvantage, as we saw Mendoza was able to expose some of the flaws that Fedora has. And what I'm expecting for Fedora to come in and to show us that in his short layover, he has gone back to the drawing boards, made the adjustments, and he is going to come into this fight not making the same mistakes of taking the height difference to his advantage and what he's been able to get away with all of his fights up until this point. So one of the things that I think that Tim Tszyu can obviously take from the last performance of Fedora is coming into this fight not just targeting the body because it's right there in front of him, but changing levels. going to the body and then finishing up top, because as of now, that's still a huge question mark in the corner of Fedora, is if he's learned to get his hands back up and to be a little bit more defensively sound. I think that this fight for sure is going to take place in the inside. Fedora being a guy who's not shy of fighting in the pocket, but also has the ability to fight from range. I think that the boxing fans are getting a better fight here, a more exciting fight in a late replacement in Fedora, with the fight just being a week away. I'm excited to see this one. I'm definitely tuning in. I was tuning in before, but I'm just a little bit more excited to see this matchup, given the styles of both guys and given the awkwardness and height advantage of Fedora. I'm interested to see how Tim Tszyu performs. Can he make an adjustment in just short notice of having the replacement of his opponent? I don't know. We'll see though. Count number 4. We finally have the announcement of Canelo Alvarez's next opponent in his highly anticipated annual fight week for Cinco de Mayo Day week. That is HANEY-SHAKUR, taking place May 4th in Las Vegas on both Amazon Prime Video and DAZN. I would have to say that this is the biggest win, not only for HANEY-SHAKUR for obvious reasons in getting this matchup and what we thought we would never see, a Mexican versus Canelo Alvarez, as he has gone on record multiple times saying that he would not fight another Mexican opponent, as much as recently with him defending not taking on Benavidez. But here we are. The fight's taking place May 4th in Las Vegas on Prime and on DAZN. Arguably the biggest win for PBC, as we had a little bit of a shakeup with Canelo potentially leaving and going back to Matchroom's Eddie Hearn. Outside of the exciting, explosive matchup that we are all anticipating to get in this style of a fight, with both of these guys having that typical Mexican style, pressing forward, stalking, in-your-face fight, I think that we're in for fireworks. This is arguably the biggest test for HANEY-SHAKUR. All right, let's not say arguably. It is the biggest test for HANEY-SHAKUR, with the clear difference between both of these guys' performances against John Ryder. One being the fact that when Canelo went up against Ryder, he went the distance, all 12 rounds, versus HANEY-SHAKUR and what he was able to do in getting Ryder out of there much sooner. I'm not sure if either performance really gives us a projection of what to expect in the May 4th matchup, but one thing's for sure, like I said, this is definitely going to be the biggest test for HANEY-SHAKUR. I think that Canelo is just going to be a little bit too much in a guy with Maguire who arguably doesn't have the best defensive style when going up against pressure fighters. I think that with the experience of Canelo and the power of Canelo is going to present a challenge that HANEY-SHAKUR may have not known what he got himself into. Going to the press conference, in that same breath, I felt like HANEY-SHAKUR was happy to be there. And I think that that's very telling to how he may show up. One thing's for sure, if HANEY-SHAKUR stands a chance in this fight, the details are going to be in his strategy and his preparation during his training camp. I'm riding with Canelo on this one. Furthermore, this is a win-win situation for Canelo, boosting him in his reigning status as the face of boxing. I don't see that changing anytime soon, especially with us having this on multiple platforms. Count number 5. We're not moving on from Canelo just yet, as the press conference took place this week and Canelo threw out several shots to David Benavidez, starting with the fact that he was never made an offer for $5 million. And even with that offer, that amount of money, he could fight anybody, so it doesn't make Benavidez any more special than anybody else. He goes on to say that he has nothing else to prove, that his career and his legacy has been solidified by all of the champions that he's faced and all of the things that he's been able to accomplish in multiple different divisions. It then finishes up by saying that Benavidez has nothing to offer him and nothing to offer to the fight outside of 25 more pounds over 168. It says that he'll fight Benavidez tomorrow for 150 to 200 million. First off, 150 to 200 million, where are you getting that money from? And even if you are getting the money, a lot of people say that the money is over in Saudi Arabia and they are the ones that will make that fight happen. I have very little faith that they will see return on that investment if they were to offer Canelo $200 million. We're not even talking about what it's going to take to put on the fight and what the offer has to be as well to Benavidez. That's a lot of money. However, Team Benavidez and Jose Benavidez Sr., the father of David Benavidez, feels as though Saudi Arabia could make that fight happen, and they have kind of hinted towards, don't be surprised if we see the matchup in September, and warns Canelo to be careful what he asks for because his wishes just may come true. But as a fan of the sport and as a fan of both of these guys, who wouldn't want to see that fight? However, in the meantime, Team Benavidez has shifted their attention and refocusing on a fight that may take place June 15th, that being on the undercard of Tank, as they take their step up in weight classes from super middleweight to light heavyweight on their quest to unify. So where does this actually push the potential of this fight to? I think it pushes it in a corner. I don't think that we actually see this fight, and especially with David Benavidez deciding to move up in weight classes, I see a situation where he's going to move up to light heavyweight and become very comfortable at that weight. It's going to feel a lot different, and he's probably going to have a better training camp going into this weight as opposed to going into light heavyweight and then coming back down to super middleweight to make the fight happen if we're actually going to get it. Because now that changes the landscape of things in respect to the weight difference of the two. Benavidez already being a significantly bigger guy, not only in size and physique, but actually in weight, and where he comes back rehydrated at on fight night. When he was fighting at 168, you can only imagine with him moving up to 175 what he'll rehydrate back to the night of the fight. And I think if Canelo has gone on record officially giving us a reason why this fight doesn't happen, and that being the weight difference, we certainly won't see it with him stepping up to light heavyweight and what that's going to look like. Count number 6, and talking about the face of boxing, with Canelo fighting in May and Tank fighting in June against opponents that both, I wouldn't make the argument, are equal dancing partners, which one of these guys will rise to the top in their argument of remaining the face of boxing? When we unpack this argument between the two of Tank versus Canelo and who's the face of boxing, we already know that we're not necessarily looking at the resume of these guys nor the accolades that they have been able to accumulate, but we're strictly focusing on who's the face of boxing from a money standpoint and from a viewership standpoint. I think Canelo has a strong chance to still be in the face of boxing after both of these guys finish up with their fights in May and June. And that being for the simple fact that in having his fight cross-streamed and offered pay-per-view on Amazon Prime and on DAZN, not to mention the contract that he has with his home country where his fans over in Mexico are able to watch the fight for free. The massive reach that Canelo's fight will reach and streaming on cross-platforms, I think is just going to supersede what we see for Tank come June when he finally makes his return to the ring. And that alone is enough to still give Canelo the face of boxing. But we'll have to just sit back and wait for the numbers to be released after both of these guys fight and see who's going to be standing at the top as the face of boxing. Count number 7. Terrence Crawford pulls a power move in forcing himself to be the mandatory challenger against the winner of Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fedor, using his super champ status as the undisputed king of the welterweight division. This move proves to show that he is moving away from strictly focusing on the money fights and now chasing greatness again to become a 3-divisional undisputed champ. I think that this is the best move and best route for Bud to take, given the fact that he is not getting any younger. I think this route and him stepping up to 154 to the super welterweight division, he positions himself to potentially become an undisputed champion in a 3rd division in less than 12 months maybe. I give it 12 months for him to pull this off, and I say that because Not only is he being able to force himself to be a mandatory for a title fight, but with the last minute replacement of Sebastian Fedora going up against Tim Tszyu, and that fight going from a non-title fight to a unification fight for the WBO and the WBC, as Sebastian Fedora was ordered to fight for the vacant WBC belt. Ahead of this change, he finds himself in the best situation to step up, to be the mandatory for the winner of this fight, to be able to grab 2 belts with 1 fight. And then we look at where the other belts are in the time that this unification takes place between the winner, I'm saying Tim Tszyu, and Terrence Crawford. There may be a chance for the other 2 belts, the WBA and the IBF, to get under the wing of a single champion simultaneously, where we could see Bud go from winning the WBC and the WBO and then fighting the next champion for the unification of all 4 belts. But at most, he has the opportunity to unify the super welterweight division in as little as 3 fights, maybe 2. I think that this is a huge win for Crawford, the biggest move that he could have made, a move that some saw coming, others did not. Either way, I like the road that he's back on. And it all boils down to Crawford just needing to remain active as he's on the back leg of his career. Remain active, continue to build the hype off of each fight, as I'm foreshadowing for Bud Crawford to become a 3-divisional undisputed champion in as little as 12 months at max. We'll see what happens though, but I'm extremely happy to see now the path that Crawford's on and to get him back inside of the ring very soon. Count number 8, we have a teaser beef on our hand as Ryan Garcia and Tank goes back and forth on social media, all stemming from Tank critiquing the performance of Ryan Garcia's sparring session versus a 4-1 prospect, predicting the knockout shot of slipping the jab and throwing the brick over top, or something like that, he said. Of which Ryan responds in typical Ryan fashion of questioning why Tank would even say something like that, as well as dissing him for attempting to be relevant and wondering why he's even worried about him in the fight that he has coming up. In all of this, somehow Shakur wiggled himself into this argument and getting Ryan to commit to fighting him next, but Ryan said that that is if he doesn't get the rematch with Tank. And then Tank took to Instagram to post a picture of the ref waving off the fight and him getting the KO win versus Ryan Garcia with the caption saying, June, exclamation mark, emoji, emoji. We all know that Tank is making his return back to the ring in June of what we thought was going to be against Frank Martin, but maybe we're not getting that. Maybe we're actually going to get the Ryan Garcia versus Tank rematch. And if we know anything about Tank, he is not chasing belts. He's not chasing dismantling champions, but he is chasing prize fights, and that is certainly going to be the rematch with Ryan Garcia. But let's not jump the horse yet. Ryan Garcia still has a fight to take place April 20th. We still need to see the performance that he puts on against Devin Haney to even see if this fight is worthy of making it, and if it can do the same numbers that it did the first time. Either way, I know everybody will be tuning into that fight. And I think that we see a similar performance and a similar result that we got originally in April of last year, again in June, if both of these guys are to rematch and face each other. That's all I have for the 8 count this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed these updates. Certainly let me know what your thoughts are on each of these takes. Let me know who you think the face of boxing will be by the end of June. Let me know if we're getting this rematch between Tank and Garcia, and much more that was said this 8 count. Until next time,